Today's video is for producers who work with vocal recordings and want their vocals to sound great, whether in a demo mix or in a final track for release. Vocals can be a tricky subject for engineers. The thing is, modern sound libraries and synths come pre-processed, but vocals don't. They come straight from the recording, raw and untouched. That's why producers often run into the same problem. Mixing the instrumental is easy, but vocals are a whole different story. Once placed in the mix, the vocal can end up buried, dull, thin, or just not as impressive as you want it to be. Hi, I'm Ivan, a mixing mastering engineer, and today I'll show you how to mix vocals easily and get a perfect vocal track in your mix. First, and not many people talk about this, but good recording quality is already 80 to 90% of the way to a great vocal mix. I've been mixing for over 10 years and I've never seen a bad recording turn into a Grammy-winning mix. Or even just a great one. No matter what techniques or secret tricks you use, it's just not possible. That's why, as a producer, your first priority should be ensuring a high-quality recording. The better the recording, the better the final mix. And when it comes to mixing, you can always delegate it to professionals who have spent years perfecting their craft. For example, our studio is dedicated to mixing and making songs sound their absolute best. It's not expensive, it's quick, and delegating mixing is one of the smartest ways to prepare your song for release. But no matter how you handle mixing, the quality of the vocal performance and recording is what really matters. A well-recorded vocal already gives you a 90% chance of it sounding great in the mix, so focus on nailing the recording first. The microphone and the room acoustics shape the vocal in the way that no EQ can create or fully fix. The mic needs to match the vocal, not necessarily an expensive microphone, but the right one. And it also has to suit the room. When you've got the right mic in the right environment, the recording will already sound great and need minimal processing. The second point I want to talk about is how the vocal sits with the instrumental tracks. So you've got the right mic, the right room, and the perfect recording. But even the best vocal track can be ruined by an accompaniment if it's not done the right way. Even the perfect vocal, bright, powerful, and clear, can sound weak and unimpressive if the instrumental part is mixed wrong, masking and competing with the vocals. When that happens, the vocal ends up sounding like it's under a cloud, shaded and covered. Your first task is to check what's happening in the frequency range of 400 to 600 Hz. This region is usually responsible for boxy sounds. The vocal is likely present there, and if piano or guitar also occupies this range, it's a red flag. The vocal will probably be masked and won't sound clear in the mix. The general rule is no matter what frequency band it is, the vocal and accompaniment should not fight for the same place. You should always separate them. Now let's check the high frequencies. I'm talking about the range where sibilant works. S, sh, ch, and other sibilances appear typically between 5 and 10 kHz. This is also the frequency range where hi-hats are present. You have to make sure hi-hats don't clash with the singer's sibilant sound. How do you fix this? A simple solution is to make sure that hi-hat sparkle and brightness sit above 10 kHz. Otherwise, if hi-hats overlap with vocal sibilants, it will muddy the mix and hurt the clarity of the vocal. Now that we briefly discussed the basics of instrument placement and organizing high frequencies, we can talk about processing the vocal itself. First, let's look at the case when your vocal record is done well. As I said earlier, a great recording won't need much processing. If the recording is solid, all you need are just 4 plugins, an equalizer, a de-esser, and 2 compressors. These plugins are enough to shape the vocal however you like. You can bring it forward or push it back, make it louder or more intimate. In professional vocal mixing sessions, these 4 plugins are the foundation. Let's go through them one by one. First, equalizer. Use any EQ you like, maybe an analog emulation like the SSL channel strip or a standard digital EQ like FabFilter Pro Q. I won't tell you which is better, it depends on your workflow, but if you're unsure, start with one of these two, SSL channel strip, FabFilter Pro Q. Now, how to use the equalizer. First, apply a low-cut filter. Cut the low frequencies up to the first fundamental frequency of the vocal. This depends on the singer's timbre. Male vocals For male vocals, the cut will be typically around 100 Hz, while for female vocals, it's usually close to 200 Hz. It all depends on the vocal. Always check the frequency spectrum of your track and adjust accordingly. The goal is to remove unnecessary low end without actually affecting the vocal's body. Next, you need to decide how bright you want the vocals to be. Compare your track with reference songs. Pick a few recent industry quality records from the Billboard Top 50 or at least Billboard 100. Listen to your vocal against the references and see if it's too dark or too bright. To adjust this, you'll use the high shelf and low shelf EQ filters. So if your track is too dark, use a low shelf to gradually reduce the low frequencies below 1 kHz. Move the shelf down while comparing to your reference tracks until you find the right balance. The same approach works if the vocal is too bright. In that case, use a high shelf to bring down the high frequencies. One important note, a general rule with EQs is to cut rather than boost. So if the low frequencies feel too weak and you want to add more body instead of boosting the lows, try cutting some highs. Once the brightness is in line with your reference tracks, there's one more EQ move to make. Usually there are 1 or 2 narrow frequency bands that need to be cut. These are unwanted resonances. They could be caused by room reflections, or they might just be certain frequencies that stand out too much for the specific vocalist. Either way, they harm the overall sound. Your job is to find them and cut them by 2 to 3 dB using a bell filter. Having done this, in most cases, you already have the solid vocal track. Beginners often try to get too much out of the equalizer using too many bands, filters and curves, over processing the vocal when it's not necessary. EQ works best with a subtle, delicate approach. A high shelf, a low shelf, and a couple of bell filters should be enough to shape a great vocal track that sits perfectly in the mix. But sometimes the simple EQ approach isn't enough. You might find that even after these adjustments, your track still doesn't sound close to your reference. If that's the case, it probably means the recording isn't perfect. There is an alternative way to process a vocal when the recordings have flaws, and I'll cover that later in the video, so keep watching and we'll get to it. Now let's finish up the processing for the good vocal recording. So far, we've matched the brightness to the reference track, fixed a couple of problem frequencies with the bell filter, and now it's time for the next plugin, the de-esser. You'll need it to control sibilance. Usually 2 to 3 dB of de-esser compression is enough. Next, we apply 2 compressors. The industry standards are TubeTech CL1B and the next one is UA1176. Why these two? The TubeTech CL1B is a smooth, soft compressor, while the UA1176 is an aggressive one that adds harmonics. Together, they create a thick, impressive vocal sound. The soft compressor evens out the dynamics without adding distortion, keeping the sound as natural as possible. On top of that, the UA1176 adds punch, presence, and harmonic richness, making the vocal cut through the mix. For the settings, keep it simple. Set the CL1B for 3 to 5 dB of compression with medium attack and release times and 4:1 ratio. For the UA1176, use a very short release time and set the ratio to 4:1 or 8:1 depending on your preference. The higher the ratio, the more harmonics distortion you'll get. Aim for 3 to 7 of gain reduction. To dial in the right attack time, start by setting it to the minimum, then gradually slow it down. A shorter attack time makes the vocal more aggressive and upfront, while a slower attack time smooths it out and pushes it slightly back in the mix. Listen carefully and find the perfect attack time for your track. And that's it. This is how easy it is to process a well-recorded vocal so it sits perfectly in the mix. But what if your recording isn't that great? What if this simple 3-step process, EQ, de-esser, and 2 compressors, isn't enough? Now we finally get to that part. In this case, don't overcomplicate things by stacking EQ bands or endlessly tweaking compressor settings. I'll show you what to do instead, the professional approach. So, If your recording isn't perfect, there's the chain I recommend using. We'll be working with an equalizer, a multiband compressor, a de-esser, two dynamic EQs, a neutral compressor, and an aggressive compressor, which we'll use carefully. It's a bit more complex than the basic approach, but very effective. Now let's break it down step by step. First, the equalizer. The same approach as with a good recording, but this time you'll likely find more than just two unwanted resonances. Instead of two bell filters, you may need around 4 to clean up the problematic frequencies. Still don't overdo it. Next, multiband compressor. You can use FabFilter Pro MB multiband compressor. Here's how you set it up. You'll create full bands inside the multi-band compressor, targeting the key frequency areas of the vocal. The band number 1 covers the vocal's first octave, including the fundamental frequency and early harmonics, approximately 80 to 250 Hz for male vocals and 200 to 450 Hz for female vocals. The band number 2, the range where the boxy tones build up, typically around 400 to 600, though it may shift higher or lower depending on the vocal's timbre. Band number 3, the area where harsh frequencies often appear, usually between 1.5 to 5 kHz, 2 to 4 kHz for lower voices, 3 to 5 kHz for higher voices. Band number 4 adds air to the track, but can also emphasize sibilance, typically in the range of 5 to 10 kHz. For each band, set medium attack and medium release a 3:1 ratio and adjust so you're getting about 2 to 3 dB of compression on each band. This compressor can also change the tonal balance. How do we do that? If the sound isn't bright enough, we apply stronger compression to the lowest band. If it's too bright, we apply stronger compression to the highest two bands. How do you know if the vocal is not bright enough or too bright? You compare it to your reference tracks. This way, you can use the multiband compressor almost like an EQ to shape the frequency balance you're aiming for. Once you've reached the right balance with the multiband compressor, add a de-esser like wave sibilance. This plugin is neutral, not aggressive, which is why I like it. After that, use two dynamic equalizers. The first one can be DSAC 2 or FabFilter Pro Q3 or 4. We'll use this to balance mid frequencies. The second is Soothe 2, which is irreplaceable for working with mid-high and high frequencies. Its main job is to tame harshness in the sound, and it does that exceptionally well. Now their settings. The most problematic zone often is 400 to 500, where the boxy sounds build up. A small room environment enhances these frequencies, making it hard to fully fix them with a Q or a multiband compressor. That's where a dynamic equalizer helps. For DSAC or FabFilter Pro Q, focus on the boxy frequencies and adjust the plugin so it cuts them as much as you want. For Soothe 2, the default preset is usually enough. Sometimes you may want to shift the attack time towards 0, then use the depth knob to set how much you want to cut. But be careful, if you turn depth too high, it might seem like it cleans everything up, but it actually damages the sound. Some distortion sounds like a comp filter or flanger effect may build up, so don't overdo it and always listen closely to the results. After this, you take a simple compressor. Unlike when your vocal recording is high quality and you can use compressors to add harmonics in color to the sound like TubeTech CL1B or 1176, with a medium quality recording, this approach won't work. Extra harmonics can actually make things worse because these recordings often contain artifacts, problematic frequencies, and other unwanted details. Aggressive compression, especially one that adds harmonics and color, will only bring the flaws to the surface. That's why in this case you need to be extra careful. Choose a clean, classic compressor like Waves R compressor to apply 2 to 3 dB compression with the medium attack and medium release time. Your goal here is simply to smooth out the dynamics and balance the loudness throughout the track and between the verse and the chorus. After this, the vocal track should be ready. If the quality allows, you can try adding UA 1176 after our compressor for some extra harmonics and character. And that should be it to prepare the vocal track when the recording quality isn't the best. By the way, when you find the chain that works for your lead vocals, you can use the same chain for backing vocals too, just adjusting some settings to fit them. You might use different equalization, lighter compression, it all depends on the song. But the chain itself can definitely stay the same. Using the same chain will save you time and give you great results. After this, you can add time-based and pitch-based effects. There are no strict rules on how to use time-based and pitch-based effects. It all depends on the music and personal taste. Each song creates its own space and mood, so every track calls for different reverbs, delays, and so on. Some songs need room reverb, others call for hall, chamber, or something else entirely. It's all about creativity, what you like, what you're aiming for in the sound. Technology has come a long way and there are tons of creative time and pitch-based effects you can experiment with. And of course, you can always check reference tracks to see how time-based effects are used there. A basic guideline is to add some room reverb to imitate a natural space, maybe a bit of hall reverb, and use delay creatively at the ends of words and phrases. But beyond that, you can do whatever you want. These days, there's a real trend, and I see it firsthand with the huge number of projects we work on our studio every month. A lot of musicians and producers are getting really creative with reverb and delay, adding perfect effects to their tracks. When we as engineers receive demo tracks and multi-tracks for mixing, we often don't even want to change anything in the effects. They're already so well done. But the only advice I'll give you about reverb and delay, and this is very important, so listen carefully, is this. From the very beginning, when working with your vocal track and you're ready to apply reverb, delay, or other similar effects, always use sound channels. Do not put reverbs on inserts. Why? First, if you apply reverb directly on the track without a send, you're immediately limiting your options. If later you want to use another reverb or even a third one, you won't be able to do it properly. One effect can't be stacked over another this way, and you won't get a good result. Also, when you send your multitrack to your mix engineer, if the reverb and other effects are on inserts, you won't be able to send the effect track separately. That means the engineer will have fewer options when working with your vocal track. And let's say you decide to create a Dolby Atmos mix like most artists do now. In that case, you simply cannot send a track with effects already baked in because Dolby Atmos requires effects to be separate from the vocal track. There's no way around that. So, make it a habit to use sound channels in your mixing session. Set up a template in your DAW with sound channels already prepared. Create a template with the effects you need: room reverb, hall reverb, chamber reverb, 1/8 note delay, 1/4 note delay, chorus slap delay, and so on. This way you'll have about 10 effects ready to go in different sessions. You won't forget to put them on soundtracks and everyone involved will benefit from it. That's it. Thanks for watching. I hope this video is useful to you and that you take away more than just one helpful idea for mixing your vocal tracks. This will make the mixing process easier and help your demos sound great. If you haven't subscribed to our channel yet, please do. Don't miss out on valuable mixing tips that will help you level up your mixes and your career. And of course, if you ever struggle with mixing, I highly recommend our studio. You can always reach out to us for mixing and mastering, and in just 3 days, you'll receive a perfect industry-level record from professional mix engineers, ready for release and ready to compete on the charts. With over 10 years of experience, we've mixed and mastered thousands of songs, worked with major labels and famous artists, and contributed to the big commercial projects. So, let us handle the mixing for you. Free up the massive amount of time you'd spend learning mixing and instead use it to create more songs, connect with your audience, build your media presence, and do everything else that will skyrocket your career as an artist. We're not just mix engineers, we're an artist's best friend. So follow the link below and get in touch. We'll be happy to help.